Man, how can this thing be so smooth? It's crazy. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Make a beautiful online presence with Squarespace. Welcome back to the channel, this is Scott. In this video, we're going to try to identify what kind of animal this is. I think it might be a cat, but it also might be a bear, I'm not sure, so let me know in the comments below. But more importantly, we're here to discuss what's actually inside this man-bear pig. The smoothest linear switches I have used in a while. The Penghu's Giant V5 linear switch. This time it's made by Texi. The previous versions were made by Gateron, but these V5s are a little bit different. You see, these switches are so smooth because of a specific reason. UHMWPE, Ultra High Molecular Weight Polyethylene. It's a thermoplastic material that has extremely low coefficient of friction. It's the material that makes up the stem as well as the upper housing. It creates for one smooth switch, I tell you. Plus, it looks great. It's got this frosty white and blue aesthetic that will look great in a lot of white or light color boards. So let's jump right in to see what this thing is made of, literally. When you take the switch apart, you can see that it's fairly standard Cherry MX style linear layout. But as mentioned before, the stem and the upper housing is made of UHMWPE. Not only is it super smooth, but it's also a softer material, so it has an interesting gentler feel to it. The lower housing is made of nylon, which is another great material to make a housing out of. It's also very smooth and typically has a nicer, deeper sound. The spring is a standard 16mm length, 63.5 gram spring, which for production will be gold plated. As usual of my switch reviews, I'll be putting this against a few comparable switches and giving you a table-based representation of how these fare. Since this is a mid-price range UHMWPE switch, I'll be putting it against other UHMWPE switches like the Durock POM and the Mint switch, as well as the crowd favorite Ink V2 and the Smooth King Tangerine, and finally the Gateron Pro Yellow to provide a budget reference point. For the keyboard, I'll be using my KBDFANS D65 gasket keyboard that's been updated to feature a new FR4 plate from Hype Keyboards. If you're in the market for a high quality FR4 plate for your board, check them out, they make great stuff. I have the D65 as well as the GMK Pro plates, and they feature these leaf spring tabs as well as the flex cuts to help out really stiffer boards like this. Besides the plate, the D65 is completely stock and no other mods. For keycaps, I'll be using the GMK white on black with some pink GMK accents. I didn't think white on black on a white keyboard would look good, but after trying it out, I completely changed my mind. The color contrast makes for a striking board indeed. But before we jump into the sound and the stem test, a quick word from our sponsor. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that helps you build a beautiful website. It offers all the tools you need for website building and hosting, including professionally designed templates that are automatically mobile optimized and various SEO tools to get your site noticed. I actually use Squarespace.com for my own e-commerce business because it allows for seamless integration of a lot of different payment tools that makes my web store so much easier to run and manage. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial, or if you're already ready to launch, use the link squarespace.com/keyboard for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Remember what I said about these being so smooth? Check this out. You can really hear the Giant V5 and the Tangerines being in a different class versus the Ink Black V2s and the Hyperglides. None of these switches are considered scratchy, but the Giant V5s and the Tangis are just so insanely smooth. Now let's move on to the sound test. What does this thing sound like versus the others? And now we'll go to my non-scientific stem wobble test. Remember, this is a very subjective test, so take it as a reference point. But stem wobble is something that you don't want, especially with taller keycaps like SA and MT3 profiles, because it'll make the typing feel a bit looser. So let's get started. Alright, so we're going to be taking a look at the north and south. Giant V5s do have a decent amount of play in this direction. Next one is the Ink V2s, and Ink V2s, in my opinion, are pretty similar, so the two of them are pretty similar in terms of north and south wobble. Next is the Mint Linear. Still has a good amount of play, but not as bad as the V5s or the Ink V2s. Here's a Gateron Pro Yellow. Definitely better than the 3, and a pretty good control, especially with the new housing. The Tangies have always had really tight tolerances, so not a lot of play north and south. And the Durock POMs, as before, they pretty much don't move. They're very tight. Next up is going to be the East and West. In East and West, the Giant V5s do have a pretty good amount of play. Next is the Ink V2. Also does have a pretty good amount of play. Honestly, I think the V5, Giant V5, is very similar to the Ink V2 instead of stem wobble. And the Mint is actually pretty good East and West. Much better East and West than North and South. The Gateron Pro Yellow is also pretty good East and West. The new housing in play right here. The Tangerines, always tight. I think everyone knows that Tangy housings are pretty tight. And the Durock POM, once again, you pretty much can't even get this thing to move. So very tight for Durock POM. So there you have it. That's my very unscientific stem wobble test, so hope that helps. Before we move on to charts, I want to show you the unique xylophone-like sound the Giant V5s make. It's quite a pleasing woody sound. I believe it's the interaction from the UHMWPE. Pretty interesting, right? Alright, back by popular demand is my switch performance comparison chart. Remember, this is a chart of my opinion and my opinion only, so please take it with a grain of salt, and I hope it helps to put things into perspective into a single page. I also noticed that switches really do behave differently in different temperatures and breaking states, so your mileage also may vary. So in this comparison, we'll be looking at 5 different criteria from stem wobble, smoothness, sound level, sound pitch, and finally the cost. First up is the stem wobble. As you have seen in the test before, the Durock POM comes in as an absolute winner here with pretty much no wobble evident. Next is the Tangy with its nice and tight housing, followed by the new Gateron Pro Yellow. Finally, the Mint and the Ink V2s and the Giant V5s kind of trail the pack. Next up is the switch smoothness. This was truly a tough one since I felt the Giant V5s and the Tangerines were equally smooth, especially in the center. In fact, the Giant V5 may actually be a tad smoother on center press. However, I give the slight edge to the Tangerine because it is a smoother switch all around, including when pressed in the corner. The other UHMWPE switches like the Durock POM and the Mint is exceptionally smooth as well. It's crazy to say that the Ink V2 is in the middle of the pack here, but in this case, out of all these guys, it really is. Finally, the budget king. The Gateron Pro Yellow trails the pack overall. One thing to note is that none of these switches are scratchy. They're all so smooth, and just some of them are just really smooth. Next up is the sound level. As you could hear, the long pole linear Durock POM is the Clacky loudest of the bunch. It is then followed by the Gateron Pro Yellow and the Tangerine. The Giant V5 is middle of the pack here with the medium sound. Finally, the Ink V2 and especially the Mint is more on the subdued side here. The criteria that everyone loves to hear about, the pitch. Overall, I felt the Gateron Pro Yellows had the highest pitch in this case, even more so than the Tangies. The Giant V5s are about middle of the pack again, slightly higher pitch than the Durock POM. Finally, as expected, the Ink V2 and the Mint Linears are the deepest sound of them all. Last, the only objective portion of this comparison, the price. At the time of this review, the Ink V2s were the most expensive at around 75 cents a switch. Then the Durock POM and the Mint Linears come in at a very close 70 cents a switch. Next is the Tangy and the Giant V5s at around 65 cents a switch. So essentially all of these guys are about 5 cents apart from each other. Finally, the budget king, the Gateron Pro Yellows are about 23 cents a switch, so it's really a great deal here. I hope that this comparison chart helps you make the decision to find the perfect switch that you're looking for. Before I finish off with the full typing test, I wanted to let you know that what I thought about these new Giant V5s. Overall, the Switch is a very interesting one given its material composition, and it's good to see manufacturers playing around with various different materials to achieve new results. In my opinion, this is one of the smoothest switches you could get right now, and overall delivers a very good performance in the realm of linear switches. Plus, I feel the look of these are really fantastic and does a really good job of fitting into many different boards. One thing I would say that these switches really do benefit from a good layer of Krytox 205 and a thicker film like the TX 0.15mm or the Desk Keys version. As usual, if you like this video, please like and subscribe to help grow this channel. YouTube still tells me that only about 22% of my viewers are subscribed, so please help me, please the algorithm overlords. Now I leave you with a full-on typing test. Thanks.